Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of our attendees joining us today for this latest Data Science Central webinar. This is Bill Voorhees, your host. I'm the Editorial Director with Data Science Central and also Chief Data Scientist for Data Magnum. Now, I'd like to start off our event today by thanking Alteryx for sponsoring today's event. Alteryx is a longtime supporter of the Data Science Central community, and we're honored to have them sponsoring our event today. Now, past webinars are available on demand at datasciencecentral.com, and if you haven't had the opportunity to view them, I encourage you to take a look. They provide very useful insight into a wide variety of topics of interest to our data science community. Now, today's webinar is entitled Embrace the Modern Analytics Lifecycle, and that's going to be presented by Alteryx. But before we begin, I'd like to briefly review the format for today's webinar. Today's event will be an hour long. We have three presenters who I'll introduce in just a minute. There'll be 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A following the presentation, and this event is being recorded and will be available on datasciencecentral.com later this afternoon following today's live event. Now, I'd also like to encourage our attendees to provide questions throughout the presentation, because we'll be reviewing and presenting them on your behalf during the Q&A portion of today's event. Well, I'm very pleased to introduce today's speakers, Hassan Habibati with Alteryx, John O'Brien with Radiant Advisors, and Raman Kaler, who is also with Alteryx. Now, Hassan is a solutions engineer at Alteryx, where he empowers customers by helping them get to insight fast. Hassan teaches data science at the University of California, Irvine. He has hands-on analytic experience and was instrumental in launching various analytic practices in the Orange County and Los Angeles area. Now, John is a principal advisor and CEO at Radiant Advisors, and with over 25 years of experience delivering value through data warehousing and BI programs. John's unique perspective comes from the combination of his roles as a practitioner, a consultant, and a vendor CTO in the data industry. And as a recognized thought leader in data strategy and analytics, John's been publishing articles and presenting at conferences in North America and Europe for over 15 years. Now, Raman is a senior manager, alliance marketing at Alteryx, where she focuses on defining strategy and executing programs for joint marketing efforts with key strategic partners. She currently focuses on partner marketing efforts with Tableau, Amazon Web Services, and Salesforce, among others. So Hassan, John, Raman, thanks for being with us today. We're looking forward to your presentation. So how can organizations quickly discover insight in their data and develop deployable data science models? First step, understand how various components of their analytics ecosystem work together to achieve unprecedented value. So join Radiant Advisors for a discussion surrounding new research that explores solutions and reference architectures for data science platforms on Azure, all in the context of a modern analytics lifecycle. So you ready to dive in and learn how to craft an environment that optimizes capability, efficiency, and stability? Well, in today's webinar, you'll learn the stages of the modern analytic lifecycle that support enterprise analytics, the conceptual model for a modern data platform to sustain analytic capabilities, the logical and physical architectures, including frameworks and solutions architecture components that specify how technology components fit together in a data platform, and a demo of the Alteryx-based ecosystem architecture patterns that enable enterprise architects to deploy Alteryx on Azure, among other ways, to support the modern analytics lifecycle. So John, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can begin as soon as you're ready to go.
All right. Well, thank you, Bill, very much. My name is John O'Brien, and I've got the first section here where I'm going to talk about our research and the companies and clients that we've been working with for several years in this area for the modern analytics lifecycle. And specifically what we're going to apply this to and share with everyone today is how to really utilize and maximize, if you will, Alteryx on the Azure cloud platform. So with that, I will go ahead and go to our next slide here. This is just a little background on me, just for the sake of having the slides, and you guys can understand my perspective and what Radiant Advisors does here. Radiant Advisors is an independent research and advisory firm. We work with many vendors and enormous amount of companies and clients, and we specialize in specifically helping companies assess and build their data and analytics strategies. And a big part of that is, for us today, what we're finding companies have been guiding us to how to modernize their own data and analytic platforms and the strategies that go with that. So today's webinar is based on that research we've been doing for years with companies, and there's a corresponding detailed technical white paper that we'll be sending out later from Alteryx. My background is I've been a practitioner, which means I've been very hands-on for a number of years, as well as a consultant, and even a technology data CTO in startup for a number of years as well. So with all of that, let's go ahead and jump in for today. What we want to really communicate today is three key takeaways. One of the things we always come back to is that when we're talking about modern data platforms, another term out there, modern data architectures, but we say that a modern data platform really must be architected to deliver enterprise analytics. We do a lot of architecture work, education, and helping companies. And one of the big points here is that architecture has an intent. It has a purpose. And when enterprise analytics is that purpose, you can see how all of your architecture components will fall into place. As well, when we talk about one of the areas that we have seen the largest rise in adoption, as well as the biggest impact to companies for value and time to value, is really in the self-service data analytics space. So having a strategy for that will complement and enhance your current BI and data warehouse development processes, as well as really supercharge, if you will, your data science projects. So, really don't think of self-service as a standalone kind of thing. The fact is that it complements the other parts of things that you want to do within your enterprise analytics strategy. And then finally, we're really going to get into some details about how Microsoft Azure, the Azure Cloud Platform, is really geared up, and we'll show you how it can really deliver on the Modern Analytic Lifecycle, which is the process that we've seen at companies to deliver the analytic value to your enterprise. And this is something that you start out with and you grow into and gain more and more traction and more value year after year in that strategy. So those are the three takeaways we actually wanted to throw up front. So everything we're going to talk about is going to come back to really reinforcing these three components. So in today's slide here, what I'm going to want to do is really talk about bringing a couple of things together that make this big impact. So two arrows actually look like you bring these two together, you're going to get the business value that companies realize in becoming more data-centric, more data knowledgeable about the decision-making, and really increasing more analytic value. On the left-hand side, it does start with a modern data strategy. So we'll talk about the enterprise analytics conceptual architecture that we have found works very well at companies. At conferences and events, there's a lot of great conversations, and it really resonates with a lot of people. But once you start with the business perspective of this, you can then derive a logical reference architecture that can deliver that. And then we'll go one step further and take that logical and say, how do we actually apply this into Azure? What are the Azure services, platforms as a service? How do we make an Azure reference architecture work that is now derived from our enterprise analytics? And once we have this work kind of going in place, not that you have to wait for it, but when you're working on a data strategy, you're going to improve the ability to execute a modern analytics strategy. And this is where we're going to talk about the Modern Analytics Lifecycle. And we've been researching this for years at companies, and we've really pinned it down to these 7 steps that this is what companies naturally follow. So it's not really prescribed. You follow this, and this is what people are doing, and you optimize for it in your architecture. How does the Modern Analytic Lifecycle look when you're working inside of Azure? We'll specifically walk through those steps in Azure for you. And then we're going to talk a little bit, because it's always important to understand that when you're operationalizing Alteryx, When you take that into Azure, you have so many more benefits, so much more scalability and stability that you can also leverage Azure to make Alteryx even run better. So those are the 6 points that I've got to cover today. So let's go ahead and jump into what drives enterprise analytics for us. So let's start at the top of this. If you're looking at your enterprise and you're looking at what business needs and demands are for data, for analytics, you're going to find there's an area for business intelligence and reporting that we have been serving for decades and has continually matured and gotten better. But really, it is the performance management of your business. That's not going away. There are obviously ways to be more optimal about it, but the business need for those forms of analytics still remain. On the right-hand side at the top, you can see, of course, data science and AI. We hear all the hype and buzz about this delivering value and the reality that what it's able to do and how companies are just starting to wrap their heads around that. But now we're talking about a platform that can deliver both the BI piece as well as the data science piece. So it's a different form of development in business value delivery, but it's still based on data. Now, in the middle piece is where we've really seen the rise in adoption and value for enterprise self-service data analytics. And this is because we are empowering more people in the business and the data science teams, end users, to work directly with data that understand the context and the domain knowledge to the point that they can make either business intelligence better because requirements analysis, data validations, and things like that happen quicker and higher quality. And then they also really supercharge the data science side, which is doing the data prep, building the analytic models faster, deploying them faster, and it's all about gaining scale and speed there. So the first blue kind of band that's horizontal at the bottom is saying that this is all driven off of an enterprise data lake. We can build streaming data ingestion from our operational systems, external systems to bring data into the data lake, into those data warehouse databases, into analytic databases, or into Spark clusters, and be in the lake for future projects and exploration. On the top side, we have what we refer to as the data unification layer. And this is a series of tools that can be brought together, but these are capabilities that you need. A data catalog to find what you have and understand. Data governance that makes sure the data is being used, accessed properly. A collaboration layer that allows people to work together and get more value, as well as an agile semantic layer. So this is the business perspective of needs, organized into 3 main categories that will encompass your enterprise analytics strategy. And then from here, what we can do is we can drive into what a logical reference architecture should look like. So now we're doing the same diagram. It's a logical architecture, but we're flowing left to right. Our operational systems, internal systems, software as a service, we know you have those out there. We see them in most companies. And your external data sets. We can ingest that. But in the modern data ingestion architecture or data integration architecture, it's really a streaming data hub type of framework, which is new for us. We have batch-oriented pulling in file ingestions, but these streaming hubs allow for subscribed data pipelines to be engineered and built to send data into our modern data platform. Primarily, our modern data platform is 3 tiers. Your certified official enterprise data warehouse and reporting data sets, high concurrency, real fast performance, analytics going there. We have your analytic optimized databases. You probably have MOLAP cubes here from some vendors. Graph databases are making a great impact in this area for graph and relationship analytics. And then we have our analytic sandboxes, which are really built for fueling a lot of the analytic self-service world as well as the big data applications. And then we have the completely flexible class, which gets classified as an enterprise data lake with structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data lake. But it allows for easy ingestion of data that can be analyzed and worked with so that it can then be organized and presented in either certified fashion or analytics fashion in the other two tiers. So on the right-hand side, what you have is your business intelligence and reporting, business capability, your enterprise self-service data, analytic capability, and your data science group. So in these areas, this is where we get the different roles in the business having their different, if you will, approaches to working with data, right? Performance management on the top, data visualization there, getting out those dashboards, things like that. Enterprise self-service, where people want to connect the data, work with it, figure it out, transform it, prep it, and then, of course, build models with that, analytic models, and deploy those. And then, of course, in some of our more advanced data science and AI classes, we have Spark clusters. Or, if we're reclassifying, you probably have a pretty high-end statistics, package already there. And, of course, people are deploying API gateways for making APIs available for analytic services in applications to their customers. So that is our logical reference architecture that can apply to different environments, different vendors, different products. But it's a singular approach here. Now, when we take this and say, let's take a look at the Azure platform and let's bring Alteryx into this, which is a great, very common best practice that we do see at companies. So what we now have using Microsoft Azure's nomenclature, we have our data sources on the left-hand side flowing to the user experience on the right-hand side. Microsoft Azure likes to break up ingest and process into two swim lanes. But what we've done is we've created a category here, one for the batch integration work, because most companies have that today, and they're going to be moving and adopting to a more streaming architecture work. So when we look at our data sources to bring in your on-premise applications, you can look at database replication technologies is a popular one we see that allows data that's being changed at applications to be streamed into the modern data platform. And then, of course, with Azure, you've got Dynamics. You can connect to SAP, Salesforce, social media. Streaming, the red dotted lines or dashed lines that you see there. Kafka on HD Insight will feed Spark on HD Insight, and then that output can go into your modern data platform. Azure Event Hub is a way that some people go where they like to use the Event Hub to bring in a lot of those different sources that are native and easily to connect and deliver very quickly. And then, of course, they have also, taken that one step further, optimizing the Event Hub to have the IoT Hub. So they have three options for ingestion depending on your data. And then from there, you can take that into Spark for building your data pipelines. The batch side, you can orchestrate with Data Factory. A recent release that we've been hearing a lot of companies have been waiting for is the SSIS DB integration. So now the packages you've had developed on-premise can run in Azure, and they can be callable as part of the Data Factory orchestration. And then here in the data platform, we've got SQL Server, you've got your SQL Data Warehouse, we've got Hive as an access layer to the data lake that is also an Azure service. So most all of these here are Azure services. They're platform as a service. You can turn them on. You get the benefits of all the cloud services right there, and it's easy and quick to deploy. Now, where Modern Analytics comes in, you can see on the right-hand side, that is our self-service data analytics area. And we've encompassed two things that we've seen at companies. One is going to be the Alteryx server, where people deploy and it connects to the different sources within the data platform, ingest, process, runs analytic models, and then can also output that back into either different databases or in the data lake for other use. Alteryx is going to have coming out shortly, we're very excited about, so we did want to mention it here, but a connector that is in beta is that Alteryx is going to be able to call those routines that are also developed within Spark. So the Spark on HD Insight is something that's going to be coming out this fall. On top of that, we did incorporate analysis services because part of the Azure format, if you're working there, you're familiar with Power BI and its capabilities and how analysis services serves as a semantic layer on top of that to serve up data visualizations to the Power BI Pro. So you've got this combination of self-service data analytics and visualizations being able to be served up by the Alteryx server, and then Power BI embedded as well. So from there, let's go ahead and shift gears now, because what we've been talking about is the modern data strategy that you need from conceptual down to physical within Azure. But we can also really start to take a step back and say, what is the modern analytics lifecycle? You know, you can give people tools, you can give them the data, but how do they approach and tackle these business challenges every time? So when we start at the top here in orange, we start with really finding that companies, this is one of our recommendations more than what they're naturally doing, is to stop and clearly define the business need. Understand and explore the decision that you are trying to make about the business with data, and clearly state what those goals are and what those objectives are before you start, because we have this tendency, start playing with data, we'll figure it out as we go along, but defining the business needs up front is one of the things that we're very prescriptive about. Now, when we start to take a look at what people naturally do, the first thing that they jump into is start to discover data. They want to see what data is available. What do I have to work with? What is that context? Can I upload some of my own data or third-party data I've come across? From there, they want to then connect to that data. Explore it, because if you find some data sources that you see described as meeting your context, you need to profile that data. You need to validate it and say, oh, this is what I expected. It's complete. It has the quality. Here's what I need to do to transform that to get it into a place where I can integrate it with some other data. So you're validating and verifying the data that you have is going to work for your business need. And then when we drop into step number 4 there, the prep and enrich, this is when we start to build that workflow with Alteryx. We connect to those sources. We throw in our filters. You transform the data. You see as you're working with real data how this is evolving, and you're producing this output set that can be, now you can jump out and say, here's that analytics and data visualization that I need to do, or this data set becomes the input for what you need to build your analytic data models with. So there's a little fork in the road there, but most of the time now we're finding within Alteryx, companies have the ability and the power to now take that and continue on to build their own analytic models, to come in and analyze the data, build these models, verify these models. The next step they'll do is visualize some of this output, collaborate with their peers, with the business, take a look at saying, is this meeting our original stated needs? Governance, how do we need to persist this data? Who are we delivering it to? Answer all of those questions, collaborate, validate everything. And then what you want after that, when it's successful, you need an easy way to deploy and operationalize this new analytic asset. Right? You have data assets from step 4, but now you have analytic assets in the enterprise that you need to operationalize, monitor, because data changes, models change, they evolve. We say that this is where the work really begins with analytics, and that needs to be a concrete step that you don't stop at step 6 or step 5. You have to really take a real sense of people are going to depend on this. How do we operationalize it? So at that point, let me go ahead and take this into what it looks like in Azure for us. So this is the diagram that we had kind of zooming in on the right-hand side of data sources and modern analytics. But what you'll see is our steps on the right-hand side. Step 1, right, state the business need, happens out here in the far right-hand side. But step 2, how do we discover and ascertain what we need to do, right? That is up here in Alteryx Connect. Connects to the data sources so you can reuse that. Step 3, connecting to those, validating, exploring them. And, of course, step 4 and 5 is where we're really doing with Alteryx Designer. We're getting into the data, prepping it, working it, building models, and then we're going to visualize that, and then we're going to work with step 7 to deploy it in Alteryx Promote. So that's how this looks, and it's also step-by-step into the follow-on white paper we have. But you can see the modern analytics lifecycle can now be fused with this enterprise analytics architecture strategy and specifically the Azure platform so easily and better. Now we're going to drill into this Alteryx server box in the bottom to talk a little bit about how we want to operationalize that, because the last thing we need to talk about is bringing Alteryx into Azure. It's going to receive all the benefits like other software does when it's running on the Azure platform. You can break up the key components of Alteryx server into separate components running on separate virtual machine or virtual machine scale sets. You have the Alteryx gallery that helps users find data sets that can be using Azure load balancer and replicated into many virtual machines. And even the internal database that Alteryx uses can run on a cluster of virtual machines. Now, very key on stability. This is something you may or may not have today, but you're definitely going to pick up in Azure because it's included. Resiliency, fault tolerance, and disaster recovery. When you're deploying this and designing it for Azure, you have availability zones, you have disaster recovery because Azure regions will take care of that with Azure's geography, and each of the regions will have dedicated high-speed networks for active-active and active-passive work processing for the Alteryx server. So you can take Alteryx server when you deploy it here, you'll get all the stability and fault tolerance that you need, as well as you're growing the enterprise analytics, you're going to be able to scale as needed and on demand the controller part, the worker part, the gallery, depending on where you need that. So this is also a great platform for Alteryx server to be running on as well. So with that, I'm going to wrap up here and turn this over to Hassan, who's put together a wonderful demo that's going to show how this really works, and you guys can see it firsthand. So with that, why don't I hand it off to you, Hassan?
Actually, it's going to Raman. So thank you so much, John.
Sorry. Okay.
No worries. And next, I'd like to spend a few minutes giving you an overview of Alteryx and the capabilities we provide. As an intro, Alteryx is a software company that delivers an end-to-end analytics platform that helps companies turn their data into actionable insights, which in turn improve their businesses. But don't just take our word for it. In Q4 of 2017, Gartner shared that we held the #1 spot in the Gartner Peer Insights Customer Choice Awards for BI and Analytics, an honor that was earned after they surveyed the customers of leading providers in the space. In addition, we were named a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for Data Science and Machine Learning earlier this year. So I'm going to go ahead and state the obvious. The reality of data and analytics in most companies today is pretty complex. As you can see here, there are a number of big challenges with people, process, and technology. Lines of business are struggling to find and manipulate data so that it can be visualized. IT is struggling with a variety and volume of data and how to securely govern its usage. And finally, data scientists are struggling to get their analytic models put into production. The state of analytics is further complicated by the fact that most companies are using a variety of tools, only reinforcing the silos that exist between IT, analysts, and the data scientists. Alteryx takes a different approach to analytics. Our platform is purpose-built to shorten the distance from business problem to business solution. And it's unique in the simple fact that we provide an end-to-end unified analytics experience that empowers all data workers to quickly and easily move back and forth between analytic tasks. And at this point, I'd actually like to pass it over to Hassan so that you can see this value in action alongside the value of Azure. Hassan?
Thanks, Raman. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So I was really thinking about what John said in terms of the business problem. And one problem I was thinking about is really a lot of companies, they hold marketing campaigns, they hold marketing events, and how do you measure, the impact of your marketing effort? How do you build a repeatable, automated, resilient process that's always going to take the leads, the prospects that you have collected, maybe combine some kind of a criteria that you care about? Obviously, if not everybody that knocks on your door is going to convert into a customer. So what is your selection criteria? And also, how do those prospects and leads fit into, are they close to your stores, from a geographical perspective? So I would like to build the process. It's going to take my leads funnel, so I know which ones are high priority leads that I should focus on. And then at the same time, I would like to publish that insight into my data warehouse, maybe build a Power BI dashboard where, people, executives and business leaders are looking at that and figuring out what is happening. And at the same time, maybe update my Hive cluster to show, to make that information available to, let's say, my marketing department or other workflows or other processes downstream that need to have that information. So, and then I'm going to show you exactly what the process is going to look like. Here's the end workflow that we are going to build together today. And I use Alteryx documentation features to really build these containers to show, the different processes that we're going to go through. If you can't read this, that's okay. We are going to zoom in and work on each one of these steps. I think I have 7 steps in here. And then the goal is really to output this insight so it's readily available for whoever needs it. And this is going to be our starting workflow. We're going to start with, the documentation layer. And then we're going to fill in the different tools that we need to achieve this high-level objective. But let me give you just a quick overview of what the Alteryx Designer looks like, and then we'll just get going from there. So here's my Alteryx design. I like to start with a new workflow. It's kind of an open canvas. You can do whatever you want with it. And in order to build that beautiful workflow that we saw, you're going to drag and drop tools from the tools palette up here onto your canvas and connect them together to build that workflow. You have tools to allow you to input and output data. That's where we're going to connect to Hive. That's where we're going to connect to our SQL Server to bring in that information. And once we have the data, we can use the preparation tools to filter it, to add any missing data, to do some custom calculations. And now our data is connected. It's filtered. It's exactly the way we want it. Now we can join these data sets together. So we can take the leads. We can take the lead information we have. We can take the store information. We can take demographic information we care about and join all that together so we can develop that insight. You can also do things. Here's the documentation tools that I showed, the comment and the container. We can see how we're going to use those. You can also do things with spatial. So you have a list of potential customers. Where are they on the map, right? Are they in my trade area? Are they within the boundaries of what I consider my coverage area for specific size, specific hospital, specific university? And we can see some examples of that. And then after that, you can start going into our advanced analytics and predictive tools, which are all built on open R language. The source is there. It's exposed. You can see it. It's not a black box. And some of the things you can do in here is start to understand the relationship between the data points, the features. Are there any redundancies? What is the correlation between different features that you care about? And then you can do things like, build a linear regression model to predict the likelihood of an event happening in the future. Maybe you want to build a decision tree. All of this is open source. You can look at the code. You can examine it, and then decide, how you want to use that. And we give you the reports to show you the accuracy, the F1 scores, everything you need to make the right decisions and to pick the right models. You can do things like A/B testing, time series where you're forecasting ahead, and even market basket analysis, all based on our language. And as you drag and drop tools onto the canvas here, the results of what you're doing will show down here in the results window. And then the window on the left is the configuration window. It's going to allow you to configure those tools as you bring them on. So let's just go ahead and dive in. I have the starter workflow here just to make it easy for us to add a level of documentation to our workflow. You notice I use this containers here, which is really a great tool to document your steps, your process in your steps. So you can see process, step number 1 says process leads data. Another really nice side effect of containers is you can actually turn them off. So if you have a piece of your workflow that's not ready yet, or maybe you just want to disable that, or you don't want to run it all the time, you can actually turn that on and off as well. So let's go ahead and do step number 1. So we have some leads data that we want to process. I have a comment here. It says input leads and context from Azure SQL Server using an input tool. This is great. So I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop an input data tool just like that. I'm going to keep it inside the same container because this applies to step number 1. And then what I'm going to do is actually go ahead and point to my Azure SQL Server. And then in terms of different data types and data sources you can point to, Alteryx can allow you to connect to flat files, data in the cloud. You can have API points that you want to connect to. You can have structured databases, unstructured. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and select. And really, once you create a connection to a data source, you save it, and then now it's saved, and then you can just call upon it. So in this case, I'm going to actually go ahead and connect to my Azure SQL server that I set up for this demo, and it's gonna go ahead and find that server, and it's gonna give me a visual query builder, and I'm gonna navigate over. I'm gonna get my new contacts table that came in as a result of my last marketing campaign. I would like to go ahead and process this. If you're an expert SQL user, you can go ahead and type up your own SQL code in the SQL editor. But for me, I'm just going to go ahead and click OK, refresh, and now it's going to go ahead and reach out to the database on Azure, and it's going to bring in a sample of the data just to show me that, okay, these are the contacts that came in through my last campaign that I run. This is great. If you're connecting to a production database, of course, there's some considerations that you should think about, maybe in the development phase, limit the number of records you're going to read. For me today, I'm going to go ahead and say cache my data, so I'm not making that expensive round-trip journey back to the database. So I'm going to go ahead and just drop a quick browse tool on here, and then run the workflow to see what kind of data did I get back. Okay, that's already ran. So the browse tool allows me to examine the health of my data. So you can see down here, I have all these different fields. There's a health indicator on top of the column to let me know if my data is 100% okay. Are there any missing data? Are there any null data? You can see as I hover, as I click on the columns, I get an interactive graph here that I can actually zoom in and see exactly what, the different spread of data. If there are any outliers, I'll be able to detect those right away. Here's the different business names of the people who came to my event. I have the latitude and longitude for this. I have the address. I have the city. This is great. So here's all my contact information of the prospects and the leads that I would like to work on. The next step is create a special object field from the lat and long fields that came in using the create points tool. So I want to take these potential prospects. I want to go ahead and see where they are on the map. So I'm going to switch over to my spatial tab up here on top, and I'm going to drag and drop the create points tool. The create points tool is expecting a lat and long, and I'm going to go ahead and it's actually already found the lat and long that are in my coming data set. And let me go ahead. Actually, let's just run this and see what that looks like. So I'm just added the create points. Now, if I click on the browse tool, it's still going to show me the data. But if I switch over here to the map section, now it's going to take those leads, those prospects, and it's actually showing me on the map. So I can see I got some people over here. I could maybe I have some wrong values that somebody entered, but I can actually see where my leads are. This is great. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next step. If I look here in my data set, I see that I have a new column here. That is the spatial object for that lead that came in, and it says Centroid. It's not a really good user-friendly name, so let's go ahead and rename this so we can recognize it down the in the workflow. So I'm going to go ahead and drop a select tool on here. A select tool is a really great way to rename your fields, to maybe change the data types, maybe even deciding, do I need all of these fields in here? Maybe I don't need the Salesforce ID in here. Maybe I don't need, some of these IDs. But what I really want to do is I want to come in here. I want to take that centroid. I'm just going to call it something like prospect location, or something. Prospect location. Great. So now it's not called centroid. It's called prospect location. This is great. Now I'm ready for step 2. Step 2 says process demographic data. So what this is going to do, there's certain elements that I care about for my prospects. Obviously, maybe I'm depending on the business I'm in, I'm interested in income level, maybe the education level, maybe the household size. Maybe I'm interested in knowing whether this particular prospect is renting or they have they own their own house. So whatever that is, I have some kind of criteria that I want to narrow down these prospects and really focus on the high value contacts. I'm going to go ahead and bring an input data tool on here, just like we did before. In this case, this information happens to live on Hive and an HT Insight on Azure. So I'm going to go ahead and use one of my saved data connections that I create for this webinar, and it's really going to be the HT Insight Hive, and it's a user connection. Now it's going to go ahead and I'm going to bring in this Experian household sample data, and I'm going to click OK. I can refresh to see what that looks like if I would like. And then what I'm going to do next is really take some of the columns that came back. Oh, and by the way, while I'm here, let me go ahead and cache this data. So here's a column that have HH income, contact ID, and maybe length of residence. Just for easy readability, I'm going to go ahead and just do a quick select and just maybe rename this as income, so it's easier to read. Whatever you want to do, even add a description, change the type of that data that came in, and really just for the sake of kind of inspecting my data as it comes in, I can go ahead and add a really quick browse tool. Now I can see the income levels, I can see the contact ID, I can see the length of residence, how long they have lived at this particular address. And for you, this could be a different criteria, maybe credit score, maybe education level, maybe different household size, anything that truly matters to your business. So great. This is step 2. We are done. Let's go ahead and move on to step 3. So step 3 is over here. It says narrow down based on criteria. So this is what I'm going to go ahead and then join the data that came from step 1 and then from step 2, and then go ahead and narrow it down so I can specify the leads that meet my criteria. So I'm going to go ahead and use the join tool to do that. I'm going to drag and drop a join tool, and then I'm going to keep it within that step 3. And then now I'm going to go ahead and bring the data that came in from my incoming leads, the new leads, and I'm going to bring in the data that came in from the demographic or the criteria that I care about. And I'm going to join both of those data sets have my contact ID. So I'm going to join on contact ID. In the join, you can see exactly what fields came in from the left connection. You can see the fields that came in from the right connection. Because contact ID is listed in the left and the right, I can deselect one of them. I can also rename any of these columns if I would like to do so. So at this point, I can actually go ahead and run this workflow. You can see this is really fast. What comes out of the join is really three outputs. The J represents everything that joined based on that contact ID. And you can see I have 601 records that joined here, and I can see all the fields from both the left and the right columns, including the income and the length of the residence. If anything doesn't join from the right input, it comes out from the right output, which is very clean way to find out what does not join. And if anything doesn't join from the left, it comes out from the left output. So to focus back on step 3 here, what I would like to do next is really filter this data. I'm not really sure I'm interested in all of these 601 contacts that came in. I'm going to filter out where household income is greater than $5,000, and then somebody who has lived in their house for at least 2 years, because maybe that's the line of business I'm in, and that's what's important to me. For your business, it could be something completely different. So I'm going to go ahead and drop a filter tool, and I'm going to take everything that joined, all the matches that I found, and I'm going to go ahead and specify a filtering condition. In the filter, I can specify a basic filter, really just selecting the column that I'm filtering on. I think for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and copy a custom filter that I have, and we'll just walk through that. So here's a quick filter that I did. So I'm going to go ahead and take the income, convert to a number, and I'm going to say income is greater than 5,000 right here. And I'm going to add an and condition. I'm going to say, and also the length of residence is greater than 2 years, greater or equal to 2 years. So that's going to focus in on a specific income level and people who have lived in their house for 2 or more years. Maybe I'm selling paint or home improvement products, and I want people who have lived there for a long time, or maybe even people that own own their houses, whatever the criteria might be. And I'm going to go ahead and run this real quick. And what happens with the workflow, with the filter now, is my data is split into two streams. One stream where that meets my criteria, and I can see these are people who make more than $5,000 a year, and then they have lived in their house for more than 2 years. This is great. So now I'm starting to narrow down my criteria and zoom in on prospects that I care about. Step number 4 is really going to take my store and my sales information from my stores, and it's going to say, okay, which ones of these prospects live close to my store. So I want to go ahead and then build a 150-mile trade area around my store, because I know that people are not going to drive more than that to get to my store or my hospital or my clinic or my university, whatever the case might be. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in some store information, and that happens to be a local file that I have. For you, that could be data that comes in from the cloud. Maybe it could be data that comes in from CRM. I just want to show different varieties of data sources in here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on File, and I'm going to get the store sales. It's just a local flat file that lives here. And I see I have then the ID of the store. I have the name. I have the year-to-date sales. And I also have the spatial point or the spatial object for that store. I'm going to go ahead and use this point to actually create a trade area so I can identify a circle around my store, or where I can then use it as a way to further narrow down my prospects. I'm going to go ahead and then bring in a trade area. I just connected over here. In my trade area, I'm going to specify what that looks like. So I'm going to use the store centroid as the center of that trade area. I'm going to specify 150 as the value, but that could mean different things. That could be 150 miles around my store. That could be 150 kilometers. It could also be 150 drive time minutes, and this is going to utilize TomTom's data set, where I can say, you know what, this is my customers are coming at night. Maybe it's nighttime. Maybe it's peak. Maybe it's off peak. I can actually zoom in on a specific time period. But for my case, I'm going to go ahead and say, you know what, it's a 150-mile radius around my store, and just for the fun of it, I'm going to go ahead and add a browse tool so we can see what that looks like. Run this workflow. And then now the browse tool is going to show me that, that my stores and then a 150-mile radius around my store. Okay, so now what I would like to do next is maybe clean up one of the column names here that I have just to follow my own documentation. So rename this spatial object from trade area to just make it a little bit more meaningful. I just drop a select tool on here. You can see how easy it is to really think of a follow-up step and just insert the tool, and it beautifully inserts itself as part of the workflow. And in this case, I'm just going to rename a couple of fields. So I'm going to call name. Maybe we'll just call the store name so I can distinguish it. Let's see. Store name, and year-to-date sales is too long. Maybe I'll just call it sales. It's easier to see. And then I'm going to take that. I don't need that centroid anymore. Maybe I'm going to take the trade area and just call it store trade area, right? And then I don't need the radius size for this. Go ahead and run it. So my cleanup is done. Perfect. Here's my data. Okay, so now what I would like to do, let's go ahead and move on to step number 5. Okay, and that's what, some more filtering is going to happen. So in step number 5, I'm really interested about the geospatial aspect of where these leads came from. So I want to select those prospects that live within that 150-mile circle that I drew around my stores, and I'm going to do that using the spatial match. So the spatial match is, think of it as a join tool for spatial. So it's it looks very similar. I'm going to go ahead and connect all the records that came out from my filter tool, meaning everybody that makes above 5,000K and they have lived in their house more than 2 years. So I'm going to go ahead and make that my target. And I'm going to go ahead and take my stores and make that my universe. Okay, and it looks just like a join tool. So in here, I'm going to say the spatial object I'm going to use on my target is the location. That looks good. And then the spatial object for my universe is going to be that trade area. That looks good as well. Now, I have to say that I want the prospect location to be within the trade area. So I'm going to select the option where it says target is within universe. So that means the target, that's the prospect location is within that trade area. I'm going to just leave everything else the same. And then a shortcut to add browsers, you can click on these tools and say, you know what, just add a couple of browse tools. So now if I click on that, that's going to show me everybody that's matched, and then so here's the unmatched side of this join tool. So these are prospects that are not within my coverage area, and these are going to be prospects that are within my coverage area, my service area, and my target area geographically where I'm doing business. You can see that clearly these fell within those trade areas. So this is great. Out of all the prospects, out of all the people who join my campaign or join my marketing event, these are the people I really need to prioritize and zoom in and then focus on those leads. That's great. These are qualified leads. They live within a kind of a working area of my stores. They meet the demographic criteria that I set for myself. Now I'm ready for the next step. So step 6 is, we're just going to add some custom fields, maybe full name, city, state. Maybe I'm doing some reporting. I need to have these fields in a specific way or, in a specific format. In order to do that, we are going to use a formula tool. So the formula tool allows you to create a new fields or modify existing fields. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and just let's see, copy and paste. And by the way, Alteryx tools, you can copy and paste them just like you do with once I found it, just like you do with any other tool. So I think it should be here somewhere. There you go. Oh, there it is. So you can copy and paste tools just like you do with text. It's really convenient if you have some code in in a tool and you just want to reuse that, you can just clone it by doing Control-C, Control-V. And now I have some fields that are defined in this formula tool. Let's walk through that. So I have full name, and it's going to be first name concatenated with last name. And you can see an example here. I want to create a city-state column that's maybe going to show up on a report, or I would like to have it formatted in a special way. And I'm going to go ahead and capture those phone numbers. And in case somebody just put junk nonsense in there, I'm going to filter out anything that's greater than 10, and then go ahead and format with parentheses and proper a hyphen in there. So I have a nicely formatted phone number right here. I'm going to go ahead and create a new field that's called that I'm going to call generation date. That's going to tell me the date time now function. That's going to give me a timestamp. So if I'm doing this if I schedule this to run every day or every week based on when I have my marketing events, this is going to timestamp this data so I know exactly when it was generated. So this is great. Let me go ahead and run this workflow. And now I have this rich data set down here that's going to have my leads information. These are the qualified leads, 278 of them, rather than the 600 that came out. I have the income level, the length of residence. I have the store information. I have the date this was generated, the city and state, the full name. This is great. So, this is information that really needs to be pushed out to the rest of the organization after every marketing campaign so they can convert those prospects into customers. So now I'm ready to push this information out, and then maybe they have a couple of destinations. So let me just zoom out here. Maybe I would like to push this out back to a data warehouse. So I can go ahead and update that so everybody has that visibility. Maybe I want to push this out to my Hive cluster so the marketing department or a specific business unit has that data ready for them. And maybe I want to build the Power BI dashboard so my executives have that visibility, have the right abstraction of what is happening on the marketing front. So let's go ahead and do this very, very quickly here. And I'm going to go ahead and now bring an output data tool. And in this case, this is going to go to my SQL server. And I'm going to go ahead and connect this data source in here. Before I do that, I'm going to actually drop a select tool because you can customize, go in there, you can customize the visibility and the view of what each one of your audiences needs to see. So maybe in my SQL server, I do not need to have all of these fields. Maybe I need to clean this up a little bit. I'll just go ahead and deselect everything. I'll just select a few of these that maybe I think need to go into my nice and clean data warehouse. Okay, now that one's ready to go. Let me go ahead and point it to a table, point it to a connection here. And that's going to be my Azure SQL Server. I'm going to give it a name. I'll just say this is the Data Science Central Marketing Table, something like that. So that's ready to go. I can say create a new table. This is ready to go. I'm going to do the same thing for my cluster. So I'm going to bring an output data tool, connect it here. And again, this is maybe the marketing department, and they don't need to see the same exact fields as everybody else. No problem. I can actually customize a specific output for them so they see the fields that they need. And maybe for them, they really just want to be able to reach out and contact this person. Maybe it's first name, last name, maybe phone, email, and maybe a stage and maybe a sales status, something like that. So now, and then, of course, I need to specify a table. So let's go ahead and point to the HT Insight connection that I have over here on Hive, and then just give it a name, DSC Marketing. Maybe this is for the business units, so they know this is their table, and boom, I'm ready to go. So now I'm going to go ahead and click Run, and then what's really going to happen here, I want to zoom out a little bit once it figures out that connection. And what's really going to happen here, I now have a process that's going to take these leads. It's going to take my criteria, my demographic information. It's going to take my store information. It's going to blend all that together, and it's going to create this insight. And you know what? This is a repeatable process. I can even automate this process so it runs on the cadence by itself. And now I solved that problem of having leads going to or being generated out of marketing events and me not knowing and not taking full advantage of those leads. I can optionally even create a Power BI dashboard that's automatically updated as a result of running this workflow. I look forward to your questions. Thank you so much. And Raman, go ahead and stop sharing and send it back to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that fantastic demo. As a next step, I'd like to ask the audience to actually, let me pull up the appropriate site. Visit us at alteryx.com/Microsoft templates to get your hands on very similar workflows to what Hassan just shared, so that you can get hands-on with both Alteryx and the various Microsoft products that were offered today. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to Bill.
Well, Hassan, John, Raman, thank you for that excellent presentation. So we'll get started with today's Q&A session, and I want to thank the audience for their participation. We've had a lot of questions that have come in, and we'll do our best to get through all of them in the time remaining. So during this Q&A session, I'm going to leave up this screen with contact information for our speakers if you'd like to contact them following today's event. So John, start with the self-service theme that's so important in all of this. How does the Power BI self-service and the Alteryx self-service work together?
Okay, Bill. So that's a really good question. So let me go ahead and switch back to the one slide where I think we were really showing that. I'll push this one to the audience. And like you mentioned in the question, in our self-service data analytics quadrant there on the right-hand side, it is a combination of leveraging Power BI. What we have found at companies is Power BI analysis services, when coupled with the SQL data warehouse, is a great way for them to do a lot of, the term is also self-service, but this is a little bit more of the older classic self-service data visualization. Self-service data analytics, when it comes into what Hassan just did a great demo of showing people who can get in, work with the data themselves, get it set up, can then push that back into SQL Server where analysis services and Power BI users can develop those dashboards and work on the consumption side and customizing those dashboards for that view. So self-service is both self-service on the data prep, on the analytics that Alteryx does, as well as self-service on the data visualization, which Power BI and analysis services gives you that agile flexibility to, create different views of the data that is pushed back into the data warehouse from the Alteryx server. So both of them are highly complementary, and having both of those, especially leveraging Azure's Power BI right there on the spot, is great, but you still need that Alteryx component to really deliver the full-on self-service capability.
Well, John, thanks for that clarification. And while we're back here, this far back in your presentation, there was another question that has come in, and we have time for just a quick answer. And that individual in our audience asked about data unification, which is obviously very important. And I believe, based on the way the question was asked, that person is a business analyst. And so the question is, how much effort and time should you put on data unification? And maybe you'd differentiate between data unification that happens at the very front end of the process versus data unification that an analyst might undertake for themselves with Alteryx.
So that's actually a really great question as well. Let me push that one to the audience. This is the slide I think they're referring to, and we have that top blue line, which we call data unification. So it's interesting and quick answer because we find companies doing this both ways with different results. So what we have discovered over time is that data unification is a series of components or capabilities that the business benefits from. Data catalog is a capability of finding and understanding data. Governance, of course, is working with that data. Collaboration is a capability as well. And those are capabilities we want to look for. It's not a product. Remember, this is a business conceptual kind of architecture slide right here. And what we find is while some companies say, hey, let's make the investment and put that up front so that everybody who comes through that layer accesses data through a catalog, through a governance, and through a collaborative way, the reality that we have seen at companies is that doesn't have to stop you from get going, right? You can still have your BI team working. You can still deploy self-service with a tool like Alteryx. And Alteryx has a data catalog component, and they have some collaboration capabilities within their gallery component. So it's not a must do this first. What we find is companies go in with tools, get hands-on with their data, and as they grow and mature with the enterprise and more adoption, that layer of those components, you can either find it within the product, which we actually like about Alteryx as an industry independent observer of them. They have a strategy for building and developing more capabilities in those areas. So it's not a whole bunch of other products you need to buy in order to do this. Get a tool that's in people's hands, connecting to data, and as that works itself out, companies have realized that data unification comes along a little bit later rather than up front. It's not a hindrance, or it shouldn't stop you from get going right now.
Well, John, Hassan, Raman, thank you for some great answers to some very good questions. I'm sorry we didn't have time for more, but for those of you that asked questions that weren't answered today, we'll be sending all the unanswered questions to the Alteryx team so they can follow up with you after today's webinar. I have just a few quick announcements. If you'd please mark your calendar for July 24th, that's our next DSC webinar, which will be Semantics and Cognition for Visual Analytics. Also remember that today's taping will be available for on-demand viewing later today, and you can find that on the home page of Data Science Central in the Webinar tab located at the top of the page. Well, this brings today's webinar to a close. I'd like to thank our audience for their attendance and thoughtful questions. A special thanks again to Alteryx for their sponsorship, and particularly our speakers today, Hassan Habibati, John O'Brien, and Raman Kaler, for their insight into today's topic. Well, this is Bill Voorhees. I'm very pleased to have been your host for today's event. I look forward to seeing you all again on July 24th. Have a great day.